Good afternoon, and thank you for joining this webinar. We'll give attendees just 2 more minutes to arrive, and then we'll get started. Stay tuned. Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for joining this webinar on how marketers are achieving measurement confidence in a time of performance pressure. Following this discussion, we'll have some time for Q&A, so take advantage of that. You won't have to wait until the end to submit your questions. You can add them at any point during the session through the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar platform. Everyone registered will also get a recording of this webinar in their inbox tomorrow, should you miss anything or want to revisit any part of the conversation. Today's guests are Trevor Wooden and Tsvetan Tsvetkov. Trevor Wooden serves as Vice President of Advertiser Analytics at Cardlytics. He leads a team of analytics professionals who leverage the unique Cardlytics data asset to uncover actionable insights that drive measurable value for advertisers and financial institutions. Prior to Cardlytics, he held various customer analytics and strategy roles at dunnhumby, working with clients across their retail and restaurant sectors. Tsvetan, or T. Tsvetkov, is the Senior Vice President of Outcomes at Nielsen and has over 20 years of experience in marketing analytics and consulting. T is responsible for working and driving value with Nielsen's largest advertiser and agency clients in the auto, retail, financial services, healthcare, technology, travel, and entertainment verticals in the US. Previously, he led the Nielsen US MMM practice overseeing analytics, delivery, implementing and ongoing consulting for clients in the CPG, technology, entertainment, financial services, automotive, beauty, restaurant, and nonprofit industries. Prior to joining Nielsen, T worked at Marketing Analytics and Y&R. And with that, we'll get started. Our reporters have heard from several marketers and agency executives recently who all say that the growing economic uncertainty is putting even more of an emphasis on performance media resulting in increased pressures for their teams this year and into 2023. And with increased stress on mid and lower funnel campaigns and clients demanding more from agencies, the next 6 to 12 months will be a make or break time for marketers. So with that, amid increasing economic related performance pressures, how are you seeing both advertisers and marketers adjust their strategies so far?
Yes, thank you. I can start, Christina. I would say what we're seeing right now is the advertisers are looking to start really balancing growth with profitability. A lot of our clients are getting ready for tougher times, but they're also learning. What they've done is really look at the situation we had in 2008, at what happened with COVID, and really trying to calibrate their expectations for the next 12 to 18 months. So kind of applying previous learnings with some new learnings and calibrations to get to that kind of forward-looking aspect of where the economy is going or where their category is going. And for that, they would be adjusting their marketing to really sometimes dial up kind of the profit, the short-term profit dial versus kind of the long-term investment. We can talk more about this, but sometimes that's probably not the best strategy, right? You really want to be thinking about not just the next 12 to 18 months, but what happens after that.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And first, I should say thanks to Digiday for hosting and for everyone for joining. And of course, T, thank you for taking some time to chat with me too. This is going to be fun. So there's two kind of overarching trends that we see day to day with the marketers we work with. There's certainly the aspect that every dollar counts right now, right? As T kind of alluded to. Which might sound obvious, but when you've got a potential mix of 10 or 12 different channels, then when every dollar counts, you got to be careful where you put them, right? And then the second thing would be increasing pressure to prove the value of their function and the way they're using their money to the broader organization, right? Which I think is valid, of course, in the economic times we're in now. So with both of those, I think it's led to sort of an increased focus on performance marketing channels, for example, areas where marketers know they can reach the right customer with minimal waste, and also channels where they know they can count on trackable, measurable business outcomes that again they can take back to their business to help justify their marketing spend. And then last, I'd say it's put with that theme of needing to continually, go deeper and justify how marketing dollars are being spent. It's putting even more importance on kind of cross-channel optimization models, like marketing mix modeling. A space that obviously T and the team know really well, is becoming just all that much more important as, again, every dollar counts at this moment.
Absolutely. And with those changes, how are each being affected by the other's choices? And what are the initial steps that they can take to work toward remedying those?
Yeah, I think to a large degree, what marketers need to focus on is remedying the impact of the downturn and really the impact of changing consumer choices as they are becoming more frugal, more thrifty, as other companies are becoming more frugal and more thrifty. So just let's keep in mind that potentially everybody in the category might be slashing their budget. So it's really, as an advertiser, you have to be really careful not to lose your share of voice as you are thinking of money saving, I'll call them opportunities. I would say what we found, and this is based on a norms database that Nielsen has, we run over 1,000 mixed studies every year globally, which actually creates a really large normative data that we can use to kind of apply general trends and general impact that we see from the various media channels. And interestingly enough, we see that the median amount of underinvestment across the different channels is pretty consistent. It's anywhere between 40 and 60%. And it's a little bit small here on the screen, but the first one is digital video, display, social, and TV. And the first column of numbers really shows the median level of underinvestment that we see. When we say underinvestment, what that really means is how far are you versus where you can optimally be, right? So based on laws of diminishing returns and saturation, how much can you expand? And we consistently see the median being as much as 60% in some cases under investment. And then the last column here on this slide that's being shared shows the upside, right? The opportunity to improve ROI by investing more in some of these channels. So we see opportunity on average of about 50% across all these channels. What is really surprising in this is just the consistency across the 4 channels that we're showing here. That shows that there is certain element of equilibrium of parity across these channels, but they're still below, kind of as a sum total, below where they can be for a lot of advertisers out there.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, and I love the visualization here too. I think what I'd add is it puts, again, increasing importance on the ability to measure, track, whatever you have out there in market, right? And I think that then leads to being able to make sure you're cutting back in the right places if you do have to cut back, right? But I think T makes such an important point that if it is a time of increased pressure on marketers, it's one that certainly won't last forever. And I know we'll likely touch on at some point today the idea that you've got to use this time to also continue learning and understand where consumer trends are heading and which tactics work against which type of consumer. It's a dangerous time to be thinking about, well, yes, I've got to potentially cut back some on my budget, but be careful, as you can see from this visualization here, on exactly where and how you do that, right? And stick to the channels where you have the highest level of confidence into the return you're getting and your ability to, again, reach the right type of consumer.
And just if you can add one more thing, this is a really good point, Trevor, that you made is, again, this is normative data, right? This is information we have from studies that we've done. And what we would always, of course, recommend is that you truly understand the mix and the investment within your business. Yes. So whether you work with partners like Cardlytics or Nielsen or others out there, it really comes down to what is unique to your business and to your category. To be able to kind of apply these same principles of, hey, am I underinvested, overinvested, where I am? And actually, in your case, in your company's case, I have a really high number for digital video, right? A really low number for TV, which automatically means that there is a lot more opportunity in digital video than in TV. It might be as much as 80-20, not 66-31. So really, get to a point where you truly understand the nature of your business and your marketing needs to drive optimal investment.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. And one big change that many marketing teams are facing, especially amid a potential recession and inflation concerns, is shrinking budgets, as you mentioned. And with this, how can marketers really maximize their spend without losing sight of their overall goals?
Yeah, I think I can start on this one. Of course, it starts with having a strong understanding of what, not just what your overall goals are, but how that ladders up to the rest of the organization too. I love this visual here. It's, recently our team, along with Incisive, did a survey that showed, business marketing executives, what do they think are kind of the most important business impacts that should come out of, in this case, performance marketing in particular. And, at least not surprising to us on the Cardlytics side, incremental revenue rose to the top, right? And there's certainly some other important ones on here too that certainly flow from that. But just, back to your question, a general understanding of, well, what are we prioritizing? What is the KPI we're trying to hit? If you're starting there, then, you're ahead of the game, right? And again, for us, seeing incremental revenue on the top of this list is not surprising, especially in a time of, again, pressure on budgets and that sort of thing, because it gives you the ability to then justify your spend back to the business just outside of your marketing group. Quickly, how do you get there? It's I'm sure we'll get into later in the conversation. Then it's all about finding the right strategies that, of course, perform well, but also focus on higher rates of conversion, personalization. Another way to say it, finding the right message and the right treatment at the right time to go to the right customer, right? So concentrating your spend in channels where that's possible helps to, hit KPIs like incremental revenue, which again, we just continue to see ever more important as economic times might get a little harder.
And also anticipate that these priorities might change, right? As we're sitting here today and putting ourselves in the shoes of CEOs and CFOs out there, the long-term impact of what you do today becomes even more important than the short-term impact. And yes, a lot of advertisers and companies, they're chasing not just the year, but their quarter, right? They're chasing the short-term impact and their financial performance. That the priorities might shift and might change. So be very aware, and I'm talking from the perspective of kind of the analytics folks in these companies, be very aware of the priorities of your leadership. What is the KPIs that they really care about today, right? But also be there to kind of drive a little bit of discipline to really invest in understanding KPIs for the long run, right? KPIs that are going to be consistently tracked over time, not just we're switching our priority every quarter. So to me, that's really important in these difficult times, is you have to have some perseverance, right, to be able to track the right KPIs over time.
Yeah, I love the way you position that, and it's probably the analyst in me coming out, but I like your message there to analysts in these organizations of understanding how that's shifting. I would say as well, understanding how you can influence that shift as well, right? Because we've just got so much more data at our fingertips as marketing and customer analysts than we did even 5 years ago, right? And understanding your importance to the organization and how you can influence how those kind of higher level KPIs might shift, it's just more and more important.
Awesome. And would you say that this is then a future forward or even a future proof type of strategy that they can utilize for years to come?
I think the strategy of really focusing on the right KPI is always future proof. You need to make sure that you're really trying to understand not the current quarter, but what's happening a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out sometimes, right? In terms of the trends that you see. I mean, one more comment here that has to do with just how our clients think about marketing, right? They think about it as not just as a short-term activity, but also long-term base building and kind of demand curve moving activity that basically allows you to have a higher market share, allows you to, in some cases, to charge a price premium, right? It really gets you to a point where it has you potentially dominate the category. So yeah, everybody's very much, I mean, future-proofing is such a hot term right now in many, many ways that everybody is really looking for that, but you need to have the right data, right, from the past to be able to then kind of build your plans up, your optimization algorithms for what the future is going to bring.
Yeah, if not future proof, it's at least future forward, right? And I think I go back to the the visual T was talking through before about where marketers might be underspending at the moment by channel, right? And understanding that again, in times of where there's pressure on budgets, it doesn't mean that there should be kind of wholesale blanket cuts, but more strategic approaches like T was referencing before, right? Because it is certainly a time to still experiment and understand and get a sense of what is working, right? What is driving the business forward in terms of channels, executions, that sort of thing, everything a marketer thinks about day to day. Because it's not just a time of pressure for marketers, it's a time of uncertainty and pressure for consumers too, right? So, what better time to be running performance marketing experiments, for example, and learn about, okay, in times of tougher economic pressure, what are the treatments, types of channels and types of customers that I can get in front of that again work and drive consumer spend forward and therefore drive their business forward as well, right? You know, there's certainly won't be the last change we face in the industry, right? But for example, there's still the end of third-party cookies looming somewhere down the line, right? And you know, continuing even in times of economic pressure to get learnings about what is working from a strategy perspective, understanding how different types of consumers react to different types of channels and offers is a muscle you want to continue to build up, even when it's a little more challenging to do so.
Absolutely. And I think with a lot of what you've been talking about, there's the aspect of measurement confidence, right? So what is the first step in achieving measurement confidence? And what can marketers do to work toward being more comfortable with performance marketing, especially in a time when there's an even bigger spotlight on these types of campaigns?
Yeah, I think we as marketers, we have to be very much aware of not just sales, but really all stages of the funnel, right? So really trying to understand how consumers are behaving out there. And at Nielsen, we think of consumers, audiences. So I mean, it's the same person at the end of the day, right? They're an audience when they're watching TV or online video. They're a consumer when they buy a product. So it is still the same person. So really trying to understand the entirety of the funnel. And thank you for sharing the slide. I think this is a really good one. I already kind of touched on the first 50-50 of the 50-50-50 gap. So as we kind of saw on the previous slide, half of the plans are underinvested versus the optimal level. The median level of underinvestment is about 50%, we find, and then ROI could be 50% higher if spend increased to the optimal level. I think I already talked about the kind of the second and the third of this list. I really want to kind of get your attention to what's shown on the right here, and kind of shows you what companies can do when they're overinvested and when they're underinvested. And when we say 25% are perfectly invested, of course, nobody's perfect, right? Like they're in some range of optimum, right? That says, hey, you're in a pretty good shape. You can probably turn the dial another quarter turn, but you're actually doing pretty well. Now, interestingly, the companies that are overinvested, the median level is about 32% of overinvestment, and reducing the investment from that optimal level is only about 4%. So basically to the optimal level, what that means is that companies are really good at understanding their diminishing returns, right? And understanding kind of where the C curve flattens out in terms of the response to media. Can everybody hear me? My window froze.
We can hear you okay.
Okay, very good. I just want to make sure because my video is frozen. Very good. And then what that says is that we're really getting to a place where we're really good at kind of understanding the that point of diminishing returns. I think what we have really hard time with is getting there, right? Really getting to, hey, am I at the inflection point of the response where I actually have to invest more to either break through or get the right share of voice, or invest in the right media, right? The fact that I'm investing at the right level overall doesn't mean that I'm not underinvested significantly in, let's say, digital video, right? So I think understanding the kind of the response curve across all of these different media channels is extremely important, so we don't look at this as one total investment for the business, right? We're looking at the detail underneath and what we can do within the same budget, or sometimes we're asked to do it with less budget, to really optimize and get more revenue, more new customers, et cetera.
Yeah, I think, you know, I love the question. How do we achieve measurement confidence? I love the way we put that. You know, it's something that my team thinks about multiple times a day, right? We certainly are always talking to our advertisers about, you know, sort of how we measure and that sort of thing, right? How we execute. So I think it's such an important question. And to me, it goes to, again, especially in times where every dollar counts, making sure that you have a thorough understanding of the various performance marketing vendors, channels that are available to you, right? And truly asking questions kind of all the way through the process about what execution looks like for them, right? So, you know, and I think you find that not all are created equal, right? There's different ways of executing, different way of measuring, that sort of thing. But if you kind of follow through a typical campaign cycle, understanding how a vendor might execute all the way from targeting to launch to measurement is just so important to give you that measurement confidence. So at the point of choosing an audience and launching and targeting a campaign, how do they create the right audience to meet your objectives, right? Did they truly understand the type of customer you're trying to reach? Once a flight is live, how much control do they have over who sees the ad and where and when they see it, right? And their ability to kind of maintain clear control groups there, for example, throughout the process. And then, of course, for measurement confidence at the end, once it's over, once your money's spent, how do they measure success? How do they make you feel confident in the campaign they just ran for you and how your money was just spent, right? How do they give you a sense of your return on ad spend? So I think not being afraid to ask those detailed questions of various kind of performance marketing, again, vendors and channels, is one of the most important steps, and one that everybody should be, especially now, laser focused on, as every dollar counts.
Definitely. And can you explain what true experimentation and campaign metrics experimentation is, and then how marketers can achieve this and implement it into their strategies?
Yeah, sure. I can start on this one. So, I kind of see any sort of experimentation, controlled measurement, test versus control as kind of the gold standard for marketing experimentation. It's not possible to do in every channel, but especially as you get more towards performance marketing, it's thankfully becoming more and more common, right? As marketers are pushing vendors to be able to support this type of thing. So, to me, it's about working with vendors and channels that can maintain true holdout control groups to measure against your test cells, right? That, again, ideally mirror who's seeing your advertising in every way, except the only difference is they're not seeing the advertising, right? And then we can kind of measure the business impact from there, whether you're measuring how many new customers you acquired, whether you're measuring the increase in spend that your advertising brought into the business. Being able to do that against again, true, well-maintained control group as a real robust statistical marketing experiment, to me, is, again, kind of the gold standard of where possible, what marketers should be looking for. And then, T and his team are certainly experts on this too, right? It's one of the reasons we work closely with Nielsen on a lot of things, right? And see them as experts in the space.
Yeah, I mean, it is Nielsen, again, representative samples are something extremely important in these kinds of situations. So I basically agree with everything Trevor said. The only thing I would add is that yes, testing and control is expensive, but there is efficient ways to do this these days. So that's one of the items we partner with Trevor and Cardlytics on, is really kind of empowering or powering this type of analysis so that they can do that in a very efficient and cost-effective ways for their customers.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. And then can you dive into what tools marketers can lean on to help them achieve confidence with measurement across all of their campaigns?
Yeah, there's obviously a number of solutions. We just talked about test and control. There's tried and true tools like marketing mix. There's obviously more recent tools like multi-touch attribution that really allows advertisers to get kind of the full picture, right? Now, one thing I want to always warn against is that the continuous and almost mindless sometimes pursuit of ROI may be not the best strategy. ROI is absolutely important in having kind of a number define the effectiveness and the efficiency of your marketing spend, but it's just the beginning of the conversation. I mean, we call it the why behind the ROI. So understanding ROI ROI is what it is. Understanding what's possible and what's not, right? Because there's industries and categories and brands where an ROI of 3 is simply not possible. Does that mean that they're not an effective business? No, as long as you get a number that in the long run pays back $1 for every dollar you spend, you're in really good shape, right? So I would say kind of that you always have to start with the insights, right? So making sure that you really get the interpretation of the numbers. It really takes kind of a mix between funnel metrics to get those insights. I think the next step is to really come back with the right solution, right? So whether it's marketing mix or any type of impact models at the brand level, at the top of the funnel, kind of defining what it is that you're subscribing to as an organization. They're all very strong and very effective solutions. They just come at different costs and a different cost to the organization in terms of implementation and adoption. Some tools are easier to adopt than others, so you have to take that into account as well. Because math is great, but if the numbers are sitting in a vacuum and nobody's using them, then it's completely useless. And I would say the last piece here is how can you understand from all this analysis the true value of each channel that you're investing in, so you can get that competitive advantage. We see our clients sometimes they would give up like a little bit on their ROI to kind of carve out a percentage of the budget. It doesn't have to be half of your budget, right? 5%, 10% max, to then invest in some types of new media. We know this might impact the ROI, and we know how much it's going to impact their ROI potentially down, but they can make that decision. We give them enough evidence and enough kind of numbers to be able to actually make that decision for themselves.
Yeah, I love that answer. To add on to one piece there, you were kind of getting at, it's not just about one metric, right? It's not just about ROI, for example. Looking at things collectively, for example, you might, if you just in a vacuum look at ROI in a per conversion or per action sense, then maybe you've got a channel over here that has a 10-to-1 return for you, but limited scale, and then you've got a channel over here that's got a 7-to-1 return, but 10 times the scale of your 10-to-1 return channel over there, right? So it's a situation where you probably want to balance between the two, right? You might trade off a little bit of ROI for scale, for example. So I love your focus there on it's not just about one metric, and it's about kind of the holistic picture. The other thing I'd add too is to your point of it's not just about the math either. Seek, in addition to seeking proper measurement setups with your vendors and channels that you're using, think also just about kind of pure visibility for your internal teams too. And what I mean by that in the performance marketing sense is, alongside a well-designed test versus control experiment, for example, you can also be seeking to get some of those item level conversions back onto your side, right? So that you can see, oh, here's the conversions that this particular channel drove. It's great to see the experiment results and see what my ROI was, but now since I have the conversions back and I can identify the customers or the baskets associated with it, I can go in and understand what types of things they were buying and what types of customers they were, right? So I think not just thinking about measurability, but also visibility, and I guess trackability is a good word too, into your media is important in creating that holistic picture.
Fantastic. And for any team that has faced, budget cutbacks, especially, what would you recommend that they do to get internal stakeholders on board for adopting new tools, technologies, or even partnerships?
Yeah, I think I almost think about this in reverse order, right? I think if somebody's coming in and looking to cut your budget, scrambling to find the right tool, at that point maybe a little late. It's in the game, so you almost have to, during good times, if you will, you have to make sure that you establish the tools and the organizational discipline. So when bad times hits, you can actually use those tools to have a meaningful conversation with typically your CFO, about, hey, look, we're looking to cut this much out of the budget, whether it's 10 or 15% or half of the Q4 budget, which we know happens a lot. Here is based on the tools that we've implemented as a company that now by that point the CFO trusts, right? This is what you're going to lose in terms of sales or any other KPIs that these tools are measuring, whether it's new customers. So, hey, if you're okay with X number of customers walking out the door or that X amount of revenue walking out the door, we can absolutely cut my budget by 10%, but here is what the company is going to lose. So I think the good news is marketing, I mean, this history of marketing measurement goes up many, many years, but in terms of just ROI and marketing effectiveness, I mean, this has been around since late 80s, early 90s. So we have very well-established tools to do that. Not surprisingly, it's actually marketing is one of the better measured activities out there in many companies. So really take advantage of those, but invest in the tools, well in advance of what you're going to end up needing them, right? So think about the long-term program, the long-term investment for your analytic capability, because these just kind of stand up some of these tools. That usually takes a minimum of 6 months, but it's really a 1 or 2 year journey to get to the right point.
Yep, couldn't have said it better myself. I think that with again there is a bit of lead time to setting those things up, right? So it's not something you can solve next week if the question comes in today. But there's back to one of my earlier answers about understanding the space, understanding, especially from a performance marketing perspective, what channels and tactics are available to you at any given time. We do see advertisers that have the ability to potentially redirect rather than cut, right? So if you, to T's point before, already have a strong kind of varied mix of different places you're putting your budget, you might have some that have more clear kind of visibility and results into, hey, this is exactly what this channel drove for the business. In those situations, it's possible to be in a scenario where you can ask to redirect budget to more trackable, measurable channels rather than cut completely. But completely agree with T's point of, if nothing else, if that budget cut happens, well, okay, now use this cycle as your chance to set yourself up well for the future, so that you're better established for the next one, right? And you, even with your more limited budget now, you're going and investing in channels that can drive provable outcomes, in cross-channel tools like mix modeling and other things that will enable you to better support and better defend your spend in the future.
Awesome, great points. Thank you both. Thank you, Trevor and T, for that terrific discussion. So we do have some time for some questions. And again, as a reminder for everyone listening, you can submit these via the questions tab on the platform. And a good question for us to start with is, what is the most common mistake marketers make when trying to measure the success of their campaigns?
That's a great question. I don't know what the most common is. The one that I see a lot, I kind of touched on, which is over focusing on ROI. We've had advertiser clients that will build ROI improvements into compensation plans for their marketing team. I really think it's not the best idea to do that, right? Because then you're chasing that single number. So I would say that's the most common I see. I would say the other thing that kind of happens a lot is not connecting the dots internally. So we have fantastic solution. Again, companies are sitting on a wealth of data. Obviously Nielsen brings a lot of data to these kinds of tools and analysis. But often, when we kind of get to the insight stage and the recommendation stage, it's really important that you kind of have not an audit process, but really a way to figure out how many of the recommendations are being implemented, right? Because often clients will come back and say, you said we should do this, I don't see the impact. Well, you actually did half of what we recommend, right? You implemented half of the recommendations for one reason or another, and that's okay, right? As long as we have a feedback loop 6 months later or a year later or 3 months later, depending on kind of how frequently you do this type of analysis, to then not just enforce what you should be doing, but also making sure it's being done in the organization.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Would add, you know, some of the themes we've been talking about before, just the importance of experimentation and that sort of thing. You know, I guess a common mistake is just not seeing marketers lean enough into that. And it's an easier thing to say now than maybe even 5 years ago, right? To T's point he made a few minutes ago, it's becoming much more ubiquitous and frankly cheaper to run these effective, true, real marketing experiments, right? Which wasn't always the case. And we're seeing it across more channels now, across more tactics where this types of things available to be used to measure success. But a common mistake we see is marketers not leaning quickly enough into that, right? And sticking with, you know, what might be a more kind of already baked into the business, just kind of straightforward dashboarded approach rather than really thinking about, well, how do we truly effectively measure what's working and what's not?
Perfect. And then another question that we have is, how does success differ across industries?
It's a good question. I mean, just starting simply, right? You're going to see, you know, whether it's a time of economic pressure or not, really vast differences potentially in just KPIs that people think about, right? So there's some industries that are really strongly focused on really upper funnel things. There's others that have almost transitioned, it seems, fully to lower funnel performance marketing type things. And then, of course, once you're into some of that true experimentation and measurement and trackability of media, then even to T's point before, the types of KPIs people focus on at any given time, right? You might have, you know, subscription-based advertisers that are more focused on cost per acquisition, and then you might have more traditional retailers that are more about return on ad spend and dollars that are coming into the store, right? So certainly see a lot of differences, again, in what success or KPIs mean across industries there, and then it's about, as we've talked about in this hour here, matching up the right measurement technique, and of course then use of that technique, to T's point, of not just centralizing on one thing to properly beat what it means for that industry.
Yeah, well, that's top of mind for me as well as the KPIs, as Trevor mentioned. So that's the most important, I think, difference between industries. The only other one that we faced a lot is the privacy and security one, right? So a financial services or a healthcare company have completely different concerns than a CPG company, for example, or even a travel company. So navigating the dynamics of GDPR and privacy are, I mean, it takes so much time of my day, is just making sure that these companies understand what the tools do, because they really are, the pendulum has swung so much to the security and privacy side that some companies don't even, like, we need to really explain, hey, this is using aggregate data. This is not looking at your individual consumers, right? So you just take them back to kind of the average state of affairs, the reality of what these tools do and what they don't. So I would say different industries can be very, very tense about certain elements versus others. So we face this all the time. So you kind of have to approach them with a lot of industry knowledge, some of those kind of fears as you engage with them on measurement and the types of tools that we do here at Nielsen.
Great. And then we have, looks like one last question. What are the top challenges marketers run into when trying to prove their campaign's success across business units?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, yes, like business. I would probably want to follow up on what business units here means, right? Because there's the business in terms of different kind of parts of the organization, right? Sales versus marketing, because you really need to be thinking about, hey, how am I impacting the totality of the business? There's also the different business units. I mean, for CPG companies, they might have, company might have 30, 40, 50 brands. I would say that the dimensions we work within are usually kind of like, what do you do in the portfolio level, right? So how do you actually allocate money? We didn't even touch on this today, right? But we talked a lot about it. How do you allocate across different channels? Well, a consumer packaged goods company or even a travel company might have different brands that they're supporting, and the portfolio element is extremely important. So the balance there is, it kind of depends, right? Is it a time where you're trying to prop up some of your smaller brands by going kind of full for profit for the larger brands? Is it the other way around where you're relaunching one of your bigger brands? So there's definitely an interesting dynamic. Now, there's also the global element, right, which we face a lot at Nielsen. We work globally with a lot of advertisers that have, as 100 markets in some case. So there, now you're starting to get into, okay, now I'm not just optimizing my brands, my media channels, I'm optimizing across countries. That's the holy grail. And it becomes a really complicated kind of optimization problem to do. To do that, again, is to really have consistency, because it's CF KPIs, getting individual markets on board, because that's usually the toughest one, is getting into a new market, teaching them about these kind of KPIs. So different divisions. The most important thing is to just get them all on board. I'll add one more thing, which I forgot to mention in the beginning, is having a kind of the engagement of senior leadership, as the CEO of the company, to come down, send a memo and say, hey, this is important for us as a company. We're going to be investing in this. Here's our partners. Here's our tools. People tend to fall in line a little bit more when this comes from the top. So I like the grassroots approach, but there also has to be a senior leadership, off the top approach as well. And that's a long-winded answer.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is it even simpler answer of sometimes the top challenges, they just don't have these mechanisms set up at all, right? They might not be working with someone like T and Nielsen and have a true mixed model stood up, for example, to be able to even start to compare across channels. You'd be surprised how often we run into those situations where there's not really a way to see, is there a way to understand what this business unit is doing next to this one, right? And how different marketing tactics might be performing among them. So some form of central unit of measure of optimization of performance, again, whether that's mixed modeling or certainly other options too. Sometimes the challenge is that just doesn't exist yet, and certainly highlights the importance of doing so.
Absolutely. All right, I think we will wrap up there. Thank you, Trevor and T, for your insights today. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening and submitting questions. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.